We're trying to solve a problem here.
Tomorrow's going to be very exciting.
We are so excited about the future.
I will build your roads.
We don't need roads.
Hello, and welcome to Solving for Tomorrow, Tales from the Tech Frontier, the show about tackling the biggest problems in the universe with technology. I'm your host, Brian Geisel, CEO of Geisel Software. All right, I'm so excited. Today, I'm here with Daniel Theobald, who's the founder and CEO of Mekable and the founder and chairman of Vecna Robotics, as well as co-founder and president of MassRobotics. Daniel, I guess my first question is, when are you going to finally start doing some work around here?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit of a productivity addict. So I'm working on that. If anyone knows any good therapists.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So we are looking towards what brings us to the future, but I think the past is so important for us to understand what kinds of decisions and things we might step into in the future. So I'd love to just start with a little bit of a look back. And I guess first, kind of what got you into engineering? Like, what drives your passion for all of this?
You know, I feel like creativity, designing things, creating things that have never existed is a fundamental passion of mine. I think is what makes me human personally, to look at the world and see all these ingredients and think about how I can combine them in a way to create something that's never existed before. My father, I think, was a very strong influence in that. He helped me to learn all the trades. We were fixing cars and motorcycles. We were doing plumbing and electrical, and he wasn't a technical guy, but then that came just by my proximity to everything that was going on here pre-Silicon Valley. I was just incredibly fortunate, and I totally took it for granted. I had no idea how special of an experience I was having when I attended, for instance, one of the first elementary schools in the world that had a computer lab. And I just thought, oh yeah, this is something that everybody, is experiencing. And
I love that you were saying your dad was non-technical. And I think a lot of people in our field had parents who were probably not software engineers unless they're a lot younger, but who were technical. My parents weren't technical either. So that's interesting. How did that influence you? Do you think it was a better or worse thing or a different thing, or?
It was phenomenal in one sense. And that was, the technical stuff I was so interested in, it was happening anyway. I'd be home after school. I'd be building these projects. I'd be, picking up computer algorithm problems and solving them. Like I remember spending an afternoon really excited about the, whatever it is, 8 Queens problem. And, just going home and writing software to like solve this problem. So that wasn't an issue, but the unique experience I got from my father was I really understood the physical world. I developed an intuitive sense, almost in my brain, a physics simulation engine that has served me, continues to serve me incredibly well. As a matter of fact, when I was at MIT, at first, when I got there, I was like, oh, this is so exciting. I'm going to be around all these other engineers who are so, passionate about, all this stuff. But I found that a lot of them had not had the kind of opportunities that I had to learn how to rebuild an engine, to do wiring on a home, to do the plumbing, to, whatever it was, put in a phone system. And I remember very clearly I was in a mechanical engineering class, and the professors, at the beginning of the semester said, everyone raise your hand who knows how an internal combustion engine works. And I raised my hand, and I expected everybody to. I thought this was one of those stupid questions. Right. There was only one other student in the entire class who raised their hand. And I think I just got a real sense of gratitude for having those experiences and And I've been able to couple that with this technical expertise. And I always knew I wanted to do robotics. So I studied electrical engineering, I studied mechanical engineering, I studied software engineering. And to be able to bring all of these disciplines together has given me a rich context in which to solve problems that sometimes I take for granted, and I don't realize that not everybody has that. So, when I come to the table and I've got this idea about how to do something, more often than not, it's because I'm pulling from this other discipline some idea and bringing it in to a different situation. And, I think this is really where innovation flourishes, is where we're able to pick and pull from different parts of our lives in sort of a fluid way.
Yeah. Don't you think it gives you so much more appreciation for the user if you're trying to help build a robotic system to change a tire and you've never changed a tire? That makes that a whole lot harder, right?
100%, and we'll probably talk about this later on a bit, but I have a farm here in San Gregorio where I'm working on farming automation, farming robotics. We have an open source robotic platform. We're doing a lot of IoT, general farm automation. But very early on, I said, I don't want to be the kind of engineer that's trying to solve agriculture with technology, and I don't understand agriculture. So I made a commitment to myself that I was basically going to spend 5 years learning conventional agriculture. And it was shocking, I have to tell you, just to see again, like what I thought were going to be the problems and what actually were the problems when you actually get your hands into it are two completely different things. So important for us as engineers, as designers, as whatever, to roll around in this stuff, to live it, to touch it, to play with it. This is one of the things I always tell my engineers is you've got to play. Play is where we learn. And so I want you to spend time, like, just mess around with that thing. Try it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think we had this advantage in growing up in a world where nothing was invented for computers yet. So we had to write everything from scratch, and you were writing your own database. You weren't using
Yeah.
MySQL, right? You were writing your own. And
Everything
so,
from the ground up.
yeah. And so you've built all these awesome companies and hired all these engineers in who have started in a different sort of era than we started in. What advice would you give somebody new coming into the industry, like the kinds of stuff that we're talking about right now? How do they get that? Or what do you think, what are those skills that, how do they work on those to,
Yeah.
you know?
That's a really great question. And I don't know that I have a great answer for it, but I certainly get frustrated myself when I have to spend a bunch of time learning some like random stuff that some other human made up. Like that's not the world I like to live in, right? I like to live in the world of physics and electrons and trying to learn some API that doesn't really make sense to me that some other engineer just sort of came up with. That's sort of a less enjoyable in a sense. So I certainly, I guess, was born in the right era where, when I wanted to do something, I had to start from fundamental principles in a sense. But on the flip side, the fact that we can use these tools and don't have to start everything from scratch, of course, is what allows us to make phenomenal progress on things quickly. This is very true of the robotics industry. One of the reasons that I helped, conceived of and helped to co-found MassRobotics was because we wanted to help organizations. We wanted to help young entrepreneurs and robotics startups not waste all their time reinventing the wheel and building it all from scratch.
Yeah.
But
There's a lot of that in the robotics world.
Oh, yeah. I saw when I was at MIT this pattern where a grad student would want to do a PhD or a thesis on some robotic project. And they would always inevitably end up spending like 90% of their time trying to build the hardware. And then like at the last minute, then suddenly the part that was actually relevant, the software, and then they run out of time. And it'd see this again and again and again. And, was one of my messages to the robotics industry and all these young startups is you don't need to build a new motor controller. You don't need to, figure out your unique contribution. Don't reinvent the wheel. There is so much good to be done in the world with robotics. There's so many problems to be solved. Find that problem and take advantage of every tool and every person out there that can help and build upon that. Don't try and, do things better all by yourself. It's not the way. This is a team sport, and this is something that can have a huge impact if we, really collaborate and work together.
Yeah. Robotics is one of the few places where we're still literally reinventing the wheel. Every new robot, we're like, let's come up with a new wheel design.
It's funny because, early on when I started this, there weren't many other mobile robotics companies out there. And, I tried all the things. I tried mechanism wheels, the omnidirectional wheels and this and that and the other, because, oh, this is amazing. And then you actually do, like what I was talking about the farm, you start rolling around in it. You start playing with it. You try and use it in practical applications. You realize, oh, yeah, it's not actually that good. And the idea was great, but it's the details. It's the little things that actually make it, one thing work better than another in practice. And I would always recommend to people, I'm like, oh, don't waste your time on that. And they're always like, oh no, this is the right way to do it, because they'd get so excited. They hadn't had that experience yet. Every now and then somebody would listen, but everybody reinvents the wheel.
Yeah, so much. So you mentioned, we kind of talked about the benefit of now in the present is there are so many tools out there that exist already. There are robotics platforms, or there are all these LLMs, and this isn't that new, but right, Google and just the ability to search the web is relatively new in the world. So as we're talking about the acceleration of technology and how much more we can do with all that, when that happens, a lot of people who aren't in this realm, maybe people who are, start to get fearful about two very particular things. One is, well, what happens when AI decides that it'll be easier if it just kills off the humans or whatever that particular is? And the other one is, well, isn't it going to take all of our jobs? How do you feel about those? What does that look like?
Yeah. It's understandable that people would be concerned, and obviously Hollywood, has fed a lot of that. There are a couple of things. I don't have the answer to these. I don't think anybody really does, but there are a couple of things that I think are important for people to consider. And I would say that first of all is to remember that there's nothing to be afraid of with technology. The things that we have to fear are people using technology in an unethical way. And that may, for some people, be an irrelevant difference, but I think it's really important to not get, scared about this idea of technology coming alive and turning against humans. If that ever happens, there will be a human behind it. And this is kind of why I think about what type of world I want my children to live in the future, and how important it is for us to not just blindly rush forward into a technological future thoughtlessly. We need to be more thoughtful than ever about the kind of world we want to create with this technology. I mentioned going to Lawrence Livermore National Lab. I had the opportunity to have a conversation, to spend a little bit of time with Edward Teller. For those who don't know who Edward Teller is, you can watch Oppenheimer, but he's regarded as the father of the hydrogen bomb. And I had this conversation with him that had a profound impact on me, which was that, it was basically like, well, we had to build the bomb, or if we didn't build it, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't really the conversation as much as the thoughts I had after the conversation that really had an impact on me. And that was, as engineers, we have created this world, right? There's lots of history and art and politics and all of these things. But if you think about the built world that we live in, it is because of what engineers have done. And I don't say that out of pride. I don't say that in a way that's like, look, we're better. No, absolutely not. We need all of these things. We need all these things. This is what makes humanity. This is what makes living worthwhile. But the point it makes to me is that the responsibility that we have as engineers to conceive of a future that we want to be part of I mean, that's a big responsibility. And it was very humbling to think about that. And it's easy, I think, for us to just feel like, no, it's just out of our control. And no, we can just, build stuff and it's inevitable and what's going to happen happens. And I don't believe that. I believe that humans are powerful. And, if we set the intention to create a future that is just and equitable and is the kind of place that we want to all be part of, we can do that. But we have to be thoughtful about that. We can't just rush forward. And this is one of the reasons why, for instance, at Vecna Robotics and all of my companies, I've always had a policy of paying my employees to spend 10% of their work week doing community service. This to me is so crucial to build the kind of character that I want in the engineers who are designing the future. Right? We want people that, and I think about some of the role models out there, a lot of people get very, into whoever their favorite tech, hero is or whatever. And, I want those people to take that responsibility of being a role model very seriously and, think about inspiring people to do good, not to be an asshole.
Yeah. 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 And it's interesting because you've done so much charitable work and you're working in robotics. And obviously the charitable work is the humans, but you're doing so much work in tech. How do you see those things?
Yeah.
How do they fit together for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, from the beginning, my idea that I really wanted to have every person that was working on this stuff buy into was that we are empowering humanity. Our goal with robotics and automation is to empower people to do more than ever before, to allow us to be more human. And I truly believe that that is the right approach, and that's really what technology has allowed us to do. I mean, you just think about basic automation stuff, right? I mean, it used to be that people would spend half their day just washing clothes. And it's funny, people always say, when I say, well, what kind of robot would you want? They always say a clothes washing, a robot to do the laundry. And I'm like, we have one of those. It's called a washing machine and it works really well. And they don't cost very much. But that joking aside, this is about allowing people to do more and achieve more and be better than ever before. This is not a technology versus jobs play. We have this Luddite fear that comes into us all the time, like, oh no, I see that a robot now can drive a vehicle or can, load a truck or whatever it is. And that's going to, we're going to have massive wide-scale unemployment. There were even a decade ago, I think a lot of studies say, oh, but it's different this time. Well, what's different is the pace of change. But that pace of change, I believe, equally rapidly is creating opportunities as it is changing some of the ways that we have worked in the past. Just one example. Back in the day, in order to place a phone call, you had to be connected by a telephone operator. You'd pick it up, it would ring on their side, they'd pick it up, you might even have a little chat. It was very pleasant. And then they'd ask you who you wanted to connect to, and they'd plug in that plug to the right place to connect you to the right person. And when somebody came along and said, I think we can do better, and they invented this automatic switching device, there was a lot of, oh, we're going to put all these people out of jobs. Never really happened. What happened was new people didn't enter that field. But the thing that really makes the impact on me when I think about it is that if we were to try and do today's communication using that technology, it would take many, 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 many times the population of the Earth, and it would suck still. Right? So you got to look at both sides of the equation. And that automatic switching circuit, which allowed, you could say was a precursor to modern internet communications, that has created more jobs and more opportunities and more equity throughout the world than anything that's ever happened. And so you have to be willing to take the risks, I guess, that come along with progress. And again, this is part of this idea of being thoughtful about it, of people who are in power taking responsibility for making sure that the vulnerable aren't left behind. And again, technology is a massively powerful tool for making sure that the people who need help get that help. And so jobs, the loss of jobs, honestly, it just hasn't really been a thing. It tends to be a media clickbait, fear based thing. In practice, it just hasn't happened. And honestly, I don't know if it ever will, but it's not something that I think we should be worrying about as much as how to, really just how to take care of people.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's been months since I've heard anyone complain about there not being enough operator jobs.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to get an operator job and I couldn't even get one.
I feel like people are looking for purpose, and robots are not taking jobs away that gave us purpose.
I think that's a very accurate statement. Yeah. Most people don't want to spend their entire day, pushing pallets back and forth across a warehouse floor. And I always told my employees that if you're not passionate about the work you're doing, that's a problem and we need to figure that out. And, I think it's a just criticism to say, well, that's really a, sort of an issue that, a lot of people don't get to have that choice. They sort of have to take the job that they can get, and they have to work and they have to earn money for their family. But, again, today, I don't know that I believe that anymore. I don't think that's true. I think if somebody truly has the spirit of wanting to go and find their passion and make a living doing something that's meaningful for them, technology has given us the tools to do that in a way that has never been available to us before. So, and maybe it's just, again, kind of educating people about that. I think a lot of it also is just encouraging people and helping them to know that, I guess a big part of it, as I'm saying this, is fear, right? People fear failure. And they want security, and that's understandable. But we've got so many great safety nets in place these days too. Not perfect by any stretch, and we've got a long way to go there. But we've created an environment where people can take risks and people can, explore their passions and try things. I think it's a phenomenal time to be alive.
Yeah. It's like you said, I don't know, for me, I feel like LLMs have given this recent thing where education can come so much more quickly on a lot of things. Yeah. Like you said, you have this passion for this thing. There are some new ways now for you to learn the thing and start to be involved in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the access to knowledge is just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
It's so great.
Yeah. So, with some of the things that you're working on now, maybe tell us a little bit about that. What are some of the things you're working on now, and how do you see that moving in the future? What's the future of that look like? What's the future? How does that change humanity as we push forward with it? That kind of thing.
Well, one of the things I'm really passionate about right now is food, and
I like food.
Yeah. It's delicious. But we've got a real problem with food in this country, and our habits around food are not healthy. The food we have access to is not healthy, and there are a lot of reasons for that. Some, individual choice, some systematic. But one of the things that I wish to have a positive impact on is making healthy food available for people at a reasonable price. Whole Foods is great. Honestly, I don't shop at Whole Foods because it's so expensive. Of course, I have also a farm where I grow it all here, so I don't need to. I'm very privileged in that way. But, most people can't afford good, healthy organic food. And we learn all the time about, additive X or Y or contamination Z, and, that people are putting this stuff into their bodies. We're learning more and more about, the long-term health problems caused by certain foods or certain diets. So one of the real problems with growing healthy food locally, which is another part of it, and sustainably, which is about protecting the environment, is that it's too expensive. We figured out how to grow corn and wheat and soybeans at incredibly low cost, because you can just make your tractor bigger and bigger and bigger. And you could say, automating the tractor. It doesn't even matter. We don't even have to automate the tractor, because one farmer driving a tractor can basically, grow and harvest enough corn to give diabetes to basically half the country. If we're going to be a low-live about it. But the reason that we're eating so much highly processed, high fructose corn syrup based products is because it's cheap and it tastes good. And that's going to kill us, and that's going to put a huge burden on our healthcare system. So how do we deal with this cost issue? The idea of planting and growing and picking broccoli, how can that be done effectively? Automation, up until recently wasn't really even capable of thinking about how it was going to solve these problems. Now we've got the tools to solve some of these problems, to make it so that we can make those workers who are growing the food that we need to be healthy and to not destroy the environment, so do it in a way where we're not destroying the environment. We now have the opportunity to empower them with the tools to do that and to reduce the cost for these type of healthy foods. So we've got here at Rancho San Gregorio in beautiful San Francisco Bay Area, we're building an open source farming robot, call it PFR, the Precision Farming Rover. It looks very much like one of the Mars rovers I worked on back in the day. It's big solar panels, and we've just really done some interesting things that I think are a little bit counterintuitive. For instance, this robot doesn't have batteries. It works directly from solar panels in real time. And everybody's like, oh, well, that sounds stupid, because what about when it's cloudy, or, what about at night and I think that thought process is very understandable, because we're used to using equipment. It's a very different thing now when that equipment is sort of out in the field and we don't have to use it. It's just doing its job. And so it can do its job in a very energy efficient way. What we found was, as we did this, that we were able to get about twice the work done with the energy produced from those solar panels if we use it immediately. If we're not going from a solar panel to conversion into battery, back out of battery, and there's a lot of reasons for this. It's sort of some compounding effects of, you need batteries to store it, and you need the electronics to convert it into the right voltages to convert into the chemical energy in the battery, and you need then convert it back out. And batteries are heavy, so now you have to have bigger motors to carry bigger batteries, and it's sort of just the whole problem, and it's more expensive now, and it just goes like that. So our approach was, how can we basically drive every cost out of this thing that doesn't need to be there? Not having batteries. It's incredible, because now the robots are out there. They will sleep when the sun goes down. Almost more interestingly, they will slow down when it's cloudy. They'll just work slower. And they'll speed up when there's more energy coming. And this is how we make maximum energy, maximum efficiency out of this energy we're getting.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too technical, but we basically
do loss in the batteries too, right?
Yes, the batteries have significant conversion losses. And one comment I will make to engineers, because I see this again and again and again. Engineers will often look at the efficiency rating of a motor or of a battery or something like that, and just use that in their calculations. No, guys, that's peak efficiency, and it's almost never has anything to do with reality. So, and this goes back again to the idea of playing and testing and rolling around with it and getting to intuitively understand it. But yeah, it's pretty incredible how much more energy efficient we can be when we think about problems in a different way. It's a similar, I've talked about self-driving cars, and I'm like, well, the big opportunity we have with self-driving cars is we can slow down, because if I don't have to drive and I can be productive while my car is getting me from point A to point B, I don't need to get there as fast. And if I don't need to get there as fast, this is the part that most people don't understand, I can get there in less than half the energy. Driving slower uses significantly less energy than driving quickly. And, there's like, if you stay under 35, like your gas mileage will be, it takes longer to get there. And there is some, sweet spot. It's less now because, if you had an internal combustion engine, but now with electric cars, it's like even more direct. Going slower is better. And I think we have opportunities to rethink the way we do things, using technology to reinvent the world where we're optimizing more on a system level. It's no longer now, well, I want the fastest car and I want it to be self-driving and this so I can get there faster, right? Now it should be, now we can operate in a more sustainable way.
I love that you sort of went with that intuitive, like roll around in it, but then you took it to another level, because the roll around in it thinks like, oh, I operate the robot. And so it's got to have batteries and stuff, so it's ready when I'm ready, whether there's sun or not or whatever. You kind of took that to the next level. Like, no, it doesn't, I'm not involved. We ran into this with the Roomba, where people were like, it takes too long to vacuum my floor. It's like, exactly. Well, that's funny.
The point.
Because from start to finish, to vacuum your whole house, it turns out it takes 0 minutes of your time.
Yeah. Well, we get stuck in these patterns.
Yeah.
I found this really early on is, and this is not necessarily robotics, but just technology in general. We would, when people first started to computerize a lot of their processes, I did a lot of this in healthcare. The instinct was always, okay, well, let's just take these manual processes and now put the exact same thing on the computer, or do the exact same thing with the technology. And we always lose this opportunity to like reimagine, reinvent, and to make things far, far, far more efficient than they were before. But yeah, that takes the ability to think, to sort of step away from it all and to think I don't want to say outside the box, but I just did. But you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. In a totally different way than what is intuitive to the way you might otherwise think about it.
And this is where play comes in, because you have those happy accidents where you say, oh, when you're just playing around and you're like, oh, hey, I could do this. And that's exciting. And those are the moments when I find just, the joy of solving a problem.
Yeah. That serendipity of play that is, I think it's not really luck, because if you do it long enough, you will stumble onto those things.
Yeah. I have this conversation all the time with engineers that work with me where I'm like, I just have this gut feeling that, this is the right way to approach it. And I can't even sort of explain or vocalize why. And then I'll go and start playing around with it. And, and obviously it's because I had played with it enough that like something was feeling like there was something here. And then I'm like, now I understand. I understand why that felt like the right solution because of reason X, Y, or Z.
Yeah. What did it take for you to learn to trust that feeling?
I always tell people the number one mistake I made throughout my career was not trusting my gut. And it took me a long, long, long time. Confidence is critically important in so many endeavors. And some people have loads of it. Interestingly, I wasn't a person who necessarily had as much confidence, in the sense that I would always let people talk me out of things. I would always let, the person in the room who was speaking with the most confident sounding voice, that would influence me. And there's been actually a lot of research around this that shows that all else being equal, the person who says something with the most confident sounding statement is the one that people feel they trust, they feel safe with that. Oftentimes, many, many times, that's not the person who actually knows the most.
So true.
And I don't know how to deal with that problem. But the point is, for an individual, for us, learning confidence is incredibly important. And that's sort of the other side of fear, right? Why don't we do things? We don't do things because we're fearful. If we can get rid of fear and have the confidence and know that it's okay to fail, failing is where you learn everything. And again, we're going back to this theme of play, right? You play and you fail and you try and hit the ball and you dig a hole in this or whatever it is that you're doing. And if you're failing, because those are the boundaries where you learn about how things work. If you just sort of do something and it's perfectly smooth and you're successful, that's great. But you have no idea where the boundaries are. You don't know how far you can push it, this way or that way in the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to fail.
How do you decide what to play with?
Whatever's interesting. Yeah. I feel like the subconscious doesn't get enough credit. I feel like we don't trust. I mean, our conscious brain is a very little part, in a sense, of our being, of who we are. This is one of the reasons I always tell people about how important it is to be passionate about what you're doing. And why is being passionate about what you're doing important? Well, because that's what triggers to your subconscious brain that this is something I want you to chew on. And if you're not passionate about it, if it's not something that you're thinking about in the shower, if it's something that your brain isn't working on when you're asleep at night, you're not going to have those big breakthroughs. You're not going to have those innovations. So you've got to be working on things that your brain, subconscious brain, is going to clue in on. This is an important problem, and I'm going to devote resources to trying to solve it. And this is why I think on the flip side, when I have a thought like, oh, it would be interesting if, or I want to go try that, that's not just some random thing coming out of the ether, right? That's my subconscious brain saying, I need more data.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I've even had arguments with people about, QA says, oh, this thing's broken. I'm like, no, we fixed that in a version of the code. And they're like, no, it's still doing it. I'm like, maybe you didn't get the update. Let me show you the code. And then let's make sure you have that code. And I go to the code and I'm like, it's not there. I'm like, I remember writing this code. And then I realized I wrote the code in a dream and I now have to type it in because it never made it to the computer.
Yeah. Had to make it into IRL.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Yeah. Sometimes I think of the conscious brain like CPU, and our subconscious is a little bit like GPU. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Like there's really good reason for our conscious brain, but sometimes the horsepower you can get out on a specific problem from your subconscious, if you can just let it have the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Give it a little bit of resources to work with. Yeah. Which is one of the reasons why sleep is so critically important. We used to take pride at MIT. Oh, how many all-nighters did you know? It's bullshit. Sorry. Can I say that? Don't do that. Don't do that. You got to take care of yourself. And this was, again, one of the lessons that I learned way, way too late. Not too late. I learned it eventually, but I wish I had learned it much, much earlier. You've got to learn self-care. And actually, let me just segue from that into something that's really important to me, which is mental health. This is something that is still not talked about the way it should be. There's still a lot of stigma around mental health. And the point I want to make to people here is that we all have mental health. Just like we all have physical health, we all have mental health. And this idea that you're crazy or you're not, since you said it's okay, I'm going to say again, that's bullshit. It's a very binary and completely inaccurate way of looking at the world. just like if I don't exercise, I'm learning about, exercise and protein, all this stuff. It's a hot topic these days. And, heard that if you are inactive for 3 days, you lose like 1.5 kilograms of lean mass, which is scary and mind boggling, right? But we have to, just like we have to take care of our physical bodies, we need to exercise, we need to eat right, we need to sleep. Our mental health is intimately tied together in all these things. But, particularly as a founder, I actually was just talking to somebody who's writing a book, and he said he'd interview lots of people. And he said, "Well, what's one of the most important messages you need to get out to founders?" And I said, "You've got to take care of your mental health." A large number of companies ultimately end up not being successful for one reason: the founder didn't prioritize their own mental health. And he said, the author was like, "I've talked to all these people and nobody else has brought this up." I think it's just a huge issue that we need to talk about more. And it's not talked about enough because people are embarrassed. They feel like, oh, I shouldn't be depressed. I have shame that I have some feelings. And don't. It's really important that we start to make it okay to have feelings and challenges, and to deal with those things. Just like, nobody's going to judge somebody if they like got in an accident and they had a broken leg. Yeah, you've got a health issue. And obviously it's a little bit different, but really not that much. So hopefully technology can also help us make progress in this area. We need to really think about being kind to ourselves and allowing ourselves the opportunity for self-care. And I'm hopeful that we can talk about it more and build more tools to help people do that.
Yeah. No, and as you talk about it, right, it's funny because I relate to that so much as a founder. Like, no, I need less sleep. Like, I can't be working less than any single other human in the company ever.
Yeah.
And that's just not reality. All right. So Daniel, let me ask you, as we think about future and, we talk about where are things headed. I love that long ago, you wrote a paper called Arbitrated Robot Control on the Web, System Design and Implementation, which was like 1997. Like the web was brand new. You were using Java to do it, which was brand new. People won't all take in how new those things were to be able to control robots from the internet. Like the internet just showed up at that point. And Daniel's talking about how to control robots over the internet, which is, we've been doing work with JPL to do swarming robotics for Moon, Mars application, this kind of thing. You were doing it with the internet in 1997. What would the paper be today? And then you chose Java, which was a programming language, but what technology might you use to do it? And what might the paper be today that you're looking out to the technology in the future?
I think the real opportunity that we have now is what I might call it's the system stupid. It's the system now is the opportunity. We are now in a place where we have the tools to measure and control. We can measure and control everything, but we have not yet taken the step to truly take advantage of that knowledge and power, right? Because that's what it is. The sensors are knowledge and the control is power. We haven't really taken advantage of that to build the systems that have that are optimized for the things that we care about: energy efficiency, not damaging the environment, getting things faster, whatever it is. So I think it's the system stupid. The technology, I think, is ubiquitous computing and sensing, and if we want to, I don't typically like to use the term artificial intelligence, but if we want to use that term, and then the artificial intelligence to make sense of it all and convert it to action. So one of the projects we're working on here at Rancho San Gregorio and the research project that Twisted Fields is the farm name that's here that we're working on is precisely this. We want to, basically create incredibly low cost compute and sensors that allow us to essentially connect everything and basically make the farm, and you could think of any system, the warehouse, the factory, the city, whatever, make the farm the robot, right? We tend to think of robots now as this is a mechanical device that does something. It's a physical, it's, we think of it like a humanoid or whatever. No, the farm is the robot, and the robots on the farm as well and all this. But, that sensor that's sensing how much water's in the tank, and that sprinkler over there, and that valve, and the temperature, and the internet telling me what the weather's going to be, and, all of these different things. The farm is now the robot. And I think that we have an opportunity to optimize things and save energy and save work and produce better results in a way that we never have before. And we just need to start taking advantage of that. And I think there are going to be some real exciting breakthroughs in that area. Interestingly, that, as I actually just had a phone call this morning with the CEO of Open Robotics. They're the not-for-profit organization that has given us the robot operating system. And, I was talking about this idea of, sort of the farm as the robot. And then you just brought up my master's thesis, which was basically ROS. That's what I was building was ROS. One of my big lessons learned is, had I just released that work as open source back then, we would have probably jump-started a lot of this stuff a lot earlier. Because this is exactly what I was doing. I was building these, essentially what today people would talk about, ROS nodes that could publish and subscribe to information. And you could build these large-scale computing, physical embodied AI systems to solve challenging problems, better than ever before. So that's what I think it is. I think it's now this opportunity of building systems, large-scale systems that are going to, allow us to reach the stars.
Yeah, I love it. Love that. Daniel, this has been amazing. Thanks so much for taking the time. I've really enjoyed this conversation. This is going to conclude part 1 of part 7 in this podcast series with Daniel.
Oh, you weren't joking about the 7 hours.
No, I'm kidding, but I think we could talk forever. This is super, super interesting. Daniel, thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And it's been just awesome talking to you.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. I really appreciate the opportunity you've given me to talk about some things that I'm passionate about.
Awesome. Thank you. Daniel, where can we find you online? What should people take a look at to find out more information about some of the stuff you're doing?
Yeah, I would certainly be happy to connect with anybody on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. You can reach out to any one of the organizations that I'm involved with. If people are interested in robotics, and I would encourage you to, even think about starting a company. If you've never thought about starting a company, give it a shot. Connect with MassRobotics. MassRobotics is a phenomenal organization. That's MassRobotics, MassRobotics.org. You can reach me at Theo, Theo, at MassRobotics.org. I think that we don't take advantage of asking people for help nearly as much as we could. So reach out, ask for help. I'm happy to help any way I can.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you so much. Oh, I really enjoyed this conversation. Harriet, thanks for jumping in and joining me. Let's take this postfix and dive a little deeper.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I think I'm a regular now, so let's see what today we have, right?
I was thinking I want to take a quick look at Stephen Johnson's book, The Value of Play as a Driver of Innovation. And then Shane Parrish had an interesting review of the book too. So let me dive into that quick if I can. Johnson says, because play is often about breaking rules and experimenting with new conventions, it turns out to be the seedbed for many innovations that ultimately develop into much sturdier and more significant forms. For most of us, play is a special time away from the ordinary tasks we undertake every day. It can open us up to possibilities because it requires an atypical engagement with our surroundings. Sometimes the openness provides a space for innovation.
Wow. Okay.
I think I really like that atypical engagement with our surroundings.
Yeah.
Did you ever see the show House, like Dr. House?
Is this like one of the shows that the
It's not from the
millennials?
80s, I promise.
Okay. No, I haven't.
So Dr. House keeps doing this thing show after show where he's looking at this patient and like 900 doctors have seen this patient. No one can figure out what's wrong with them. And then he goes and does something random away from the patient and picks up a screwdriver and all of a sudden has this revelation and goes running off and says the patient has cancer or whatever the thing is that it is every week. But it's not from looking at the patient or trying to dig deeper into the issues the patient had that he gets the solution. It's from going out and doing something completely different and talking with a different patient about some totally different disease and diagnosis. And then all of a sudden those things connect in his brain.
Yeah, like when Daniel was talking, I really wasn't surprised when he brought the topic of playing and he emphasized the importance of playing in the engineering field. I think all engineers play to some degree. I mean, that's why you're engineers. But I think working in corporate, I was a bit surprised about that. The fact that he is in the corporate field, it is a business he's running, but he's still emphasizing learning, playing, being creative, and making mistakes. I think making a mistake in the corporate field is basically taboo. You can't do that. You have to follow a strict line. So I was wondering, from CEO to CEO, which I know a little bit about you, but like I really want you to tell. I want us to talk a little bit more about this. Like, what do you, when you're running your business, how do you emphasize this? Do you agree with this too, or is it something that you kind of put on the back burner?
Yeah, and one of the things I say regularly is we work hard and we play hard.
Yep. Yeah.
And we really do it. And it's probably been too long since we had a Nerf gun battle around here.
Please, let's focus on topic. No, seriously, we do have Nerf gun battles.
Listen, don't you think Harriet is too serious here for 1 minute. Harriet has a Nerf gun under her desk, I promise you.
I keep
and it is loaded and ready for action. So, no, it's one of the things, and I think there's an aspect for us I think about a lot, which is just we're working so hard and you're so focused, and that's such a drain on your brain you burn so many calories just being that focused that sometimes you need that release and that way to kind of get out of it. The number of times that I've solved a problem where I was just working and working and working on the problem, and I finally went, you know what, I'm going to fix this in sleep. And I would intentionally go to sleep, and my brain, your brain sort of opens up. It opens up from that. There's a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And then this is explored in another, in a course that was talking about focused thinking. And I forget what they called the other one, sparse thinking or something. And this idea that when your brain sort of opens up and you're not fixated on the problem, like, when you're trying to think of somebody's name and you're like, oh, I'll think of it as soon as I stop trying to think of it. And so when you can get your brain into this sparse mode, then sometimes you solve these bigger problems. And it's that Dr. House moment of all of a sudden I have this solution. And so I think that element that Daniel brought into it was one I don't think as much about directly. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. like it really resonated with me. It really resonated with me because I thought about it and I'm like, oh, that's what makes a creative person a creative person. They're not afraid to try new things. And in my own situations, being in this field, being around engineers, bringing out my creativity, I think I love the fact that he touched on that. And I wish other occupations also try that too, because
Mm,
it's pretty important, honestly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's true. And it's funny because, he talked about how much of an influence his dad was on him.
Yeah.
And I had the same thing. I had an amazing dad, a ton, always encouraging when I was learning software and all that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But one thing, my dad always, on the good side, he always challenged me to push further, to
Mm.
take whatever it was I was doing and go a step further. But on the bad side, my dad would do this thing where I said, like, "Oh man, today was a great day. I worked 20 hours today."
Yeah, I know the story. Yeah, yeah.
And my dad would go, "Well, what'd you do with the other 4?" And so that can have this repressive feeling on or effect on that play aspect,
Yeah.
which, right, like you said, like other fields, sometimes we're a little too focused in whatever field or whatever our upbringing, like, oh, I have to do work, I have to do work.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe doing some play is actually what gets you to that giant breakthrough.
Yeah, it just breaks you down from this mundane, like following instructions. You're able to rethink it in a different structure. And so when he was saying that, I feel like Daniel has so much similarities with you because of like your dad, the importance of play and being creative. I was like, oh, okay, is this a pattern? But it was really important that he emphasized that. And like he emphasized a lot other topics too that I thought was interesting. And I would love for us to dive into that one too. So I think another one that he mentioned was responsibility, and I want us to touch on that because I thought that's another part that was interesting. And unlike the play, it's not a common rhetoric that I hear in this field.
Mm.
And so maybe I can throw the question at you, and then you can just kind of give us some feedback what you thought about that, and then we can move forward from there.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay, great, great, great. The one thing he talked about, I think he started sharing how he um, he wants engineers to like look at the idols, look at the people they look up to, and kind of have a sense of responsibility when they're creating something. And I thought, is this something we talk about in this field? Is this something you guys talk about in general?
Yeah, it is. It's something interesting that's probably come up more in recent years than it has in the past. I think in the past, we're just working so hard to just make something work that we're not ever thinking about what's somebody going to do with this code that sorts words alphabetically, right? Uh, but all of a sudden, now that our code could control nuclear launch or the ability of a missile to more accurately pinpoint its target, or to the thing on Facebook, right, where you're like, I'm talking about barbecuing, and then all of a sudden the ads start coming up for barbecuing. So whether or not that's coming from audio, I think in a lot of cases it's not coming from audio, and it's a longer different discussion about whether any of those companies are harvesting audio when they say that they're not. But one thing they can do for sure that makes it look like they're harvesting audio is if they notice you and I from our GPS, because we give it our GPS coordinates, they notice you and I were in the same room for a long time, then they'll give us a friend suggestion. Well, they'll take that one step further. If we talked about barbecuing and then you went and Googled new grills, it will show me grills too because it knows we were together. So it could have been a conversation we were having together. So it didn't necessarily listen to either one of us, but it came up with this like, oh, hey, you might be interested in grills. And then it notices, of course, as I'm scrolling, if I slow down when I see grills, then it's like, ha ha, he was in that conversation. And so this is another one of those things that do we talk about responsibility for is what's the responsibility of privacy? And so and they're difficult questions because I think on the other side of this discussion, you could just go become a hands-on farmer and never write software again if you were always worried about what someone was going to do with the technology. And so I think there's a very delicate balance there in being crippled by fear that someone one day may use this for something nefarious versus building something awesome that may save lives and help people today because you weren't afraid. And someone, they might use it in the future. They might not use it in the future for something bad. It's a delicate balance for sure, a difficult one. And I think that's really what this podcast is about, is what do we want the world to look like tomorrow? Because we get to build it today.
Right.
And so tomorrow, what's the thing we're going to go, I wish I had this in my hand. I wish I could do this. Well, whatever that is, today we should be building that thing.
Yeah. And to add on to that, I think what I would say too is like there's a topic that he talks about going out there and doing the groundwork and then finding meaning to why you build something. And I was like, okay, you know what? He sold me. But sell me the book. I will buy the book. Okay. At this point, you sold a non-engineering person. I thought that was so amazing. If you want to do, because he said he has a farm because he wanted to do automation for agriculture.
Yeah.
And I was like, makes sense. Why wouldn't you learn about the farms to make sure that the product you're creating for them is good, it's sustainable, it has the research that it needs? I think maybe sometimes that's the responsibility he's talking about, that sometimes maybe just by we have great ideas but not putting research into like who it's helping, how the market feels, just kind of building it out there is great, but it can come with that sense of lack of responsibility when somebody ends up using it in a way where it was never intended to. So again.
Yeah. And I think a lot of folks in technology, whether it's software or mechanical, electrical, and all those kinds of things, want to build solutions, let's say for farmers, and they kind of think, farming, how hard could it be? Like, so here's what we need to do. And then they'll know the first thing about farming. Or there's an industry they don't even know exists that we're not building solutions for. That, man, could we revolutionize the world if we built solutions for that industry? And this is the part where people need to come together, where someone who's farming and someone who knows how to build great technology can come together and build a farm built on great technology that does something neither one of them would have come up with on their own, and into other industries where they're not built around technology. They're just built around building their thing or solving their problem. And then all of a sudden we could have a way to greatly increase that productivity. Like, we have a vendor you're familiar with, mm-hmm. who creates quotes for us, and they're a giant pain for him to create a quote. He faxes himself the quote, and then he takes a picture of it. Then he has carrier pigeons bring it to the office where he can assemble it all together in a PDF that I can't read.
Hold on, can I just PSA this? If you're listening to me, you are loved. I would never laugh at your structure or your style, but you can keep going.
So we had a great conversation the other day that took about 30 seconds where I said, hey, Adobe Acrobat has this product where you can combine your PDFs into one. And he went, what? Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing all this scanning stuff so I can get it all together in one PDF. And I'm like, yeah, there's a product for that. And whether he implements it or not, right, it sort of doesn't matter. That's up to him. But now he knows about a technological solution that might make him a lot more money in his business, because we've had this thing with him when we're like, oh, we're looking at this and this. And he says, well, let me know if you want a quote. Like, why wouldn't you just send us one anyway? Well, because it was really hard. And if he could make that easier, then all of a sudden it's easier for us to get better service from him. It's easier for him to get us quotes faster, easier for him to service more clients. All these things get better in just one little simple, silly solution. And, and I think in the story we talked about earlier, where he like faxes himself a copy of the thing, sends it via courier pigeons, somebody out there is worried about now Adobe Acrobat. What are those courier pigeons going to do for work after we solve this problem? And these are the things we worry about. What's the horse going to do that delivers the paper, whatever it is? But Daniel talked about that, right? Is the telephone operators. No one is freaking out about being a telephone operator anymore.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that conversation. Yeah.
And so whatever the things are today, so right now, I have people ask me this stuff all the time. Like, aren't you worried you're putting farmers out of work? No, not even a little bit. You just said it right there. That was the key. You're turning the farmer into a subject matter expert. They're an expert on farming. Do they really need to be in the field digging a hole with a shovel, right? Do they need to be doing the manual labor? If they can become the subject matter expert, now they get paid better for farming. They produce more crops because we've been able to do it in a more efficient manner, right? We're just helping on all fronts. The person in that job is now better because what happens is they get older. They can't shovel as fast, right? And so as they're getting older and need more help, maybe have more medical bills, they're making less money because they can manually farm less crops. As we come up with ways to automate these things, we're actually improving their life. I love it. What you said was so key. We're turning them into the subject matter expert.
No, and seriously, and I think you mentioned this to me before that once you take all that tedious work, which I'm not saying their work is tedious if they're listening to me, but once you take all that work that was taking so long to do, you free them up to do more research on other things they can do better. They can come up.
Right.
I think that's the thing that I learned being in this field, that once you learn how to do something faster, your brain just start coming up with, oh, what else can I automate? And I really want everybody to get into that. Like when you get into the, what else can I automate? What else can I make it easier? Your brain just goes 100 miles per hour and you think about so many problems that probably need solutions. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my encouragement to folks listening now would be, if you're in a high tech field, like go fix your car tonight, or go plant some corn, but set up a thing in your backyard. We planted literally a couple years ago 2 stalks of corn and a bunch of other stuff in a tiny little space. Like, you'd be amazed at stuff that you can do and what you learn by getting dirty. Just by getting your hands on it, getting in it. And if you're not in the high tech field and you're listening to like, what can I learn about this stuff? Like, keep learning about the high tech field and what's going on and the technology and the innovations, and meet some people and ask them, because what you might not realize about yourself is the expertise that you've built up over your lifetime. You're a really important subject matter expert to somebody trying to close the loop on a technology that really doesn't understand how the part you do works. And I think that wraps up nicely with what we said about thinking what you want the future to be. So whether you're in high tech or whether you're a subject matter expert, whether you know it yet or not, think about how you want to apply those things to the future we want to see tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. Solving for Tomorrow is sponsored by Geisel Software. We help you create products that seamlessly automate the physical and virtual worlds using robotics, machine learning, and so much more. Find out more at geisel.software. That's GEISEL.software.